On July 19, 2010, John Wathen, with the help of SouthWings pilot Tom Hutchings, once again set out for the source of the BP slick. We didn't have to go far this time to find the first impacts of the oil. There was light sheen in the bay at the mouth of Weeks Bay. The Bon Secours Natural Wildlife area looked pretty good. There wasn't any oil in the wetlands. It was actually kind of a pleasure to fly over and catch the reflections of the morning sun coming off the bayous. Not far from shore, we encountered this Coast Guard airplane. He seemed to be flying in the general direction of the source. We also saw a couple of Coast Guard boats heading in the same general direction. It was then that we saw this, the first heavy oiling of the trip. It was at 40 miles north of the source and about 50 miles offshore. This was the first large-scale oiling that we had seen, and it seemed to be all the way across the horizon. The video camera doesn't do a very good job of picking up the colors, so I used my still camera to take close-ups of the oil on the surface to show you just how thick this stuff is. I'm primarily a photographer who uses video as a vehicle to bring you the photographic images of what I see. These are not fake images, and this is not fake video. At 16 miles north of the source, we ran into these Coast Guard boats running skimming. There were heavy mats of oil in that location, similar to what we had seen at the beginning of the disaster when there was no dispersant put in the water. We assumed that this came from the period of time when the cap was open. In the last video, we showed dolphins and whales that were in distress in the oil. This time we looked hard and couldn't find any. At 16 miles north of the source, we found skimmers in operation collecting the heaviest of the oil. When we came up on ground zero, it was as if we were looking at a different world than we did the first time. When we came out, everything was so bright red and yellow, there was a lot of oil on the surface. Now the oil doesn't seem to be quite as heavy. The Discoverer 2 is drilling the new relief well. We can all hope and pray that they hit with that thing and are able to shut this off. It would be nice to think that we can actually begin the cleanup. Q4000 sits idly by now. It was burning the crude oil straight off the bottom. As it did on this flight, June 21st, 2010. It had to be watered down from both sides to keep the rig from burning up. It was so hot. We're glad to see Noah standing by. Hopefully they're keeping an eye on things and will tell us the truth about what the water quality and air quality is around this. While things look better at the source, we can't allow ourselves to be lured into a false sense of security. There's been a lot more dispersant put into this thing than anybody knows since the beginning. There could be far more oil under the surface than there is or ever was on top. This is not the end, but only the beginning of the cleanup. As we turned away from ground zero and headed towards southern Louisiana, we ran into more heavy oil at about 8 miles north of the source. At 26 miles northwest of the source, we encountered these Coast Guard boats running skimming missions. Just 16 miles southeast of the Delta, in Barataria, and the islands that have been so heavily oiled in the past, Grand Isle, the mouth of the Mississippi River. This is what's coming. As we flew over Grand Isle, we could see that there was active skimming going on, and there was oil on top of the water in Barataria Bay. We were headed in to pick up the Louisiana Bayou Keeper for a trip over the bay to look at the islands that had been so heavily oiled in the past. Be sure to watch for the next video, A Flight Over Barataria.